I want to look at, offences in deity worship, the why, when, where, and how behind it all. Just a quick recap. As you probably remember, last week we explored the bulk offering theory. All the the whys and wherefores of bulk offering, different details of how to do bulk offering, and of course, there's so much more we could cover. And I was actually thinking to do a second session on that one, and looking at offerable and unofferable foods and all those different types of things, which is quite a big topic in itself. And so that'll be an upcoming session. This week I'm just going to look at the offences, the benefit of avoiding offences, what happens when we commit offences, the different varieties of offences, things like that. And some of the texts that I've been reading in order to get the understandings I have is the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 24, text 336, 338, 339. Also, a very well-known verse and purport in the 7th canto, 5th chapter. Was it Shavaram Kirtanam Vishnu Smaram Parasevamatram Bandhanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmanivedanam verse? That's 7.5.23 and 24. That's where Srila Prabhupada, where Prahlad Maharaj explains the 7 processes of bhakti, and then Srila Prabhupada he unpacks each one of those. Then Nectar of Devotion, chapter 8, a very important chapter. This whole chapter basically focuses on the offences in deity worship, or seva aparadha. And also Madhya Lila 15 to 61. There's quite a bit of discussion there about Vaishnava aparadha. And this is the story where Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, his son-in-law actually was very disrespectful to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so he's discussing there Saru Ninda or Vaishnava aparadha. So just a quick introduction here. We'll look at aparadhas and their effects, and particularly their effects on bhakti, because this is really what we're worried about, is their effects on bhakti. What happens when we avoid offences, and what happens when we commit offences. Now, there's a very nice verse in the Madhya Lila, chapter 24, where Lord Chaitanya, he's discussing with Sanatana Goswami what he would like him to write a book about. He's discussing basically these are kind of like the formulative instructions, if you like, for the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining to Sanatana Goswami. He said, you should glorify the holy name and explain that one must carefully give up offences when chanting the holy name. You should also describe the symptoms of Vaishnava and explain that one must give up or nullify all kinds of seva aparadha, offences in deity worship. Now, I've just pulled it's quite a lengthy purport, but I pulled out a few interesting extracts from that purport, where Srila Prabhupada explains, the devotee should always be very careful not to commit the 10 offences when chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. If a devotee very strictly follows the methods of deity worship, he will naturally and quickly become a pure Vaishnava. A pure Vaishnava has unflinching faith in the Lord and does not deviate at all. He is always engaged in perfect deity worship. So we see here Srila Prabhupada, he's putting emphasis on the benefits of avoiding aparadha, and both nama aparadha and seva aparadha, and saying that very strictly follow the methods of deity worship. And later on in the purport, he also says, one should note the specific offences against deity worship. These are mentioned in the Skanda Purana, Avantikan, spoken by Vedavyasa himself. One should liquidate all kinds of offences. And I like the term that Srila Prabhupada uses there, to liquidate. It basically is to just completely get rid of them. Now, if you go through the different places in the scriptures, as talking here about the Skanda Purana, this is the one that is most commonly referred to, but also in the Varaha Purana, there's lists of offences, and we find the Bhagavatam and other places are quoting from these different lists of offences. Often we see it mentions 32 aparadhas, and then some places you'll see it mentions 50. Srila Prabhupada often refers to 64 aparadhas. Although I've put all these different lists together in different ways, and I actually can't come up with a clear list of 64. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But the main point is there are many things to be mindful of. Now, Srila Prabhupada, again, he points this out in the where are we? We're in the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually, 4th canto, chapter 24. The Bhakti Yoga process must be carried out by avoiding the 10 offences one can commit while chanting the Maha Mantra, and 64 offences one can commit while worshipping the deity. When a devotee strictly follows the rules and regulations, Bhakti Devi becomes very much satisfied with him, and at that time he is never disturbed by anything external. And there's another extract from the same purport. When one's heart is purified by the association of devotees and by the avoidance of the offences committed when chanting and worshipping the Lord, the transcendental name, form, and activities of the Lord are revealed by the Lord. So we can see here, this is giving us an understanding of the benefits of avoiding seva aparadha, is that the heart becomes purified through the association of devotees, and also through the association of devotees, we can actually understand what is offensive service, what is conducive service. And so very, very important elements is the sadhu sangha, and also practicing the process very strictly. And then also, Prabhupada's making the point here that the transcendental name, form, and activities of the Lord are actually revealed to the devotee. There's a nice verse in the I believe it's from the Padma Purana, but Rupa Goswami quotes it, and essentially he's explaining that when the transcendental nature of the Lord is very difficult to understand through materially contaminated senses. When the senses become purified by the process of bhakti, which begins with the tongue, then the transcendental nature of the name, form, quality, and pastimes of the Lord become revealed to the devotee. So very, very important that we practice deity worship without offense, and also understanding how to actually execute devotional service properly, but also how to serve the devotees properly. So the next thing I want to look at is what is aparadha. So if you break this down into its, I'm not much of a Sanskritist. I don't know a great deal about it, but if you break it down into its component parts, there's two essential words here, and it's apa and radha. So apa means like apa sampradaya, means against the sampradaya, or the opposite of a sampradaya. It is not a sampradaya. And aparadha, there's a definition given in a Bengali dictionary. This is coming from a book by Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, which is his Reflections on Sacred Teachings, and he's quoting from some references from His Holiness Govinda Maharaj. And Maharaj explains, he says, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava dictionary, the term aparadha is explained or defined as radha sunya, which means devoid of radha. Sunya means zero, so there's no radha there. Srimati Radharani is the Hladini Shakti, the internal potency of Krishna. She is the mother of devotion, the topmost devotee, and therefore the overseer of the entire province of bhakti. Thus, aparadha means becoming devoid of Radharani by creating a situation in which the blessings, the mercy, the protection, and the benediction of the divine caretaker of bhakti is absent. So we can see that Maharaj is explaining here that when we're actually acting in a way that's offending the Lord, or offending the devotees, or whatever type of aparadha it might be, then Radharani is withdrawing her mercy, and therefore we're not able to achieve bhakti. And then there's another reference from Maharaj towards the end of the paragraph. It says, it is sunya, void, or radha sunya, that we're inviting when we commit aparadha, whether it's nam aparadha, dham aparadha, vaishnava aparadha, or seva aparadha. It means to be bereft of the mercy of Radha. So, obviously, something to be concerned about. Right, so the next point I wanted to look at is what are the different types of offences. Now, the Jaiva Dharma lists the first two, seva aparadha and nam aparadha. And, we see, as I mentioned before, sometimes different lists give different numbers of seva aparadha, sometimes 32, sometimes 50, sometimes 64. And then nam aparadha, as we understand, this is also recorded by Rupa Goswami at the end of the 8th chapter, he lists 10, or what is sometimes referred to as the dasa aparadha. So the Jaiva Dharma explains that actually there's really only two types of aparadha. There's seva aparadha and nama aparadha. Because if we look at the other aparadhas, the Vaishnava aparadha and Guru aparadha in particular, these are included in the 10 offences against the holy name. The first one, I think it's the first one, is to blaspheme devotees or to dedicate their lives to properly gain the holy name of the Lord. And then also we see to disobey the instruction of the spiritual master is another one of the offences. So if we consult with the scriptures, we'll see that actually there's really there's really only these two aparadhas, the seva aparadha and the nama aparadha. And if we go back to that purport from Srila Prabhupada from the 4th canto, we'll see here that he's making the same point. That where is it? I was just looking at it before. When chanting and worshipping the Lord, so he's saying, and by the avoidance of offences committed when chanting and worshipping the Lord. So he's making the same point there, is that these two things are actually the main types of offences to be concerned about and to avoid. Okay, so let us move right along. Okay, so this is another interesting reference here. However, it is not necessary for an aspiring Vaishnava to spend so much time constantly worrying. See, this is a really important point here. It's not necessary for an aspiring Vaishnava to spend so much time constantly worrying about offences. The key to success is to be compassionate, humble, appreciative, and grateful for the Krishna's mercy, and then the Lord in the heart will keep us from making offences. When we lose humility and compassion, not only will we be in trouble, but it is guaranteed that we'll make offences. So this is also a really important point to consider. And I will get back to this a little bit later on about keeping this in mind about losing humility and compassion and how this leads to the offences. Now, the sources of information I've taken from obviously Srimad Bhagavatam, as I mentioned before, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Nectar Devotion, and if we analyse what's quoted in those three places, you'll see that they're quoting from the Varaha Purana, the Skanda Purana, the Padma Purana, the Brahmanda Purana, and the Adi Varaha Purana. So it just gives you an idea of where all these things are coming from. All right, so the next thing I just wanted to touch on briefly before I start to get into some of these things in a bit more detail is the different categories of aparadhas. Now, what you can see on the screen here, this is referenced from the Method of Worship, or the Pancharat Pradeep, ISKCON's Deity Worship book, and this is quoting from the Padma Purana. Now, it's not to say this is the one and only division, because you'll see different scriptures break things up in different ways. For instance, we see that in the Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given a different breakdown. And he says, he's quoting a list of 32 offences, and elsewhere, he says elsewhere 50. The learned have divided these offences into 4 types. Offences in directly serving the deity, offences in establishing a deity, like an installation or whatever, offences in taking darshan of the deity, and general offences committed against the deity. So if we were to go through the offences in great detail, then we would see that these broad categories are there. But as I was saying, this list here on the screen, this comes from Padma Purana. And this is the list of offences that I was going to, explore just a little bit. Now, the first one is, as you can see, offences due to lack of purity in the body and mind. So, of course, there are all different types of things that fit into these categories. I wasn't going to get into it in too much detail, because it would just take too much time, basically. But, it's things like, not entering the temple without having washed your hands and feet. failing to brush your teeth every day. You shouldn't enter the deity room or touch the deity immediately after you massage your body with oil. Meaning, if you do an oil massage, then you should bathe after that to wash the oil off. You don't touch the deity before you've taken a bath. And just different things like that. And there's all these different types of things that are related to purity. And there's 14 different offenses that fit into that category. Then the second category that's mentioned there is offenses due to lack of respect. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a really interesting book I remember reading years ago called Bhakti Loka. And in there, he describes this aspect of offenses due to lack of respect. Now, I won't read the Sanskrit. Actually, I think it might be Bengali, but anyhow. Activities that are devoid of bhakti produce no result. And we all know that that well-known verse from the Padma Purana where it says Sampradaya Vihinaye Mantraste Nishpalamataha, that if one's not initiated in a bona fide sampradaya, then one's efforts in devotional service produce no fruit. It says Mantraste Nishpalamataha, that their mantra or whatever else they might do produces no fruit. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making the same point here. The activities are devoid of bhakti produce no result. Then he goes on to say such activities result in violence to others. Then in his commentary he says a devotee should give up seva aparadhas or offences in serving the deity, as stated in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. And then he quotes from the Chaitanya Bhagavat where he says, one who has no respect for the deity of the Lord is constantly committing offences at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. So this is a really important point, and we can take this also back to the 5 angas of bhakti, wherein we see that it's described, that the 5 most prominent aspects, if you like, or the 5 most common. The 5 most prominent aspects of devotional service, and we can see that's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but also by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion. And he gives a list of 64 different angas or limbs of bhakti, or 64 different practices of bhakti. But then at the end, he lists 5 that are most important. And he says, Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vasa Srimati Saraya Sevan. So Sadhu Sangha means to associate with devotees. So this is a really, really important element of the process of bhakti, because by association with devotees, we learn how to practice bhakti. We learn all the nuances, the ins and outs of bhakti. So very, very important element. This is Nama Kirtan, chanting the holy names, obviously the Yuga Dharma, very, very important practice, helps us to become purified of all our different anarthas, helps us to eventually reawaken our lost God consciousness. There's Bhagavat Shravan, to study the Srimad Bhagavatam, then Mathura Vasa, to reside in a holy place, and the last point, which is quite relevant to here, is Sri Matira Shariya Seva, to worship the deity with faith and veneration. So it's reinforcing the same point here, is that we need to worship the deity with faith and veneration, because if we don't worship the deity with faith and veneration, if we're worshiping the deity and we don't actually accept the deity, at least intellectually accept the deity as Krishna, then it is likely we're going to commit offenses to the deity. So this is a very, very important component of the practice of bhakti, and a very important element of avoiding offenses is to actually accept that the deity is directly Krishna. And there's another nice story, I'm not sure if I shared this story with you or not, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the story of Sakshi Gopal, wherein the young Brahman, the story of 2 Brahmins traveling around, the young Brahman serving the older Brahmana, and then at one point the older Brahmana, because he's satisfied with the service of the younger Brahmana, the older Brahmana promises him, I want to do something for you, I'll give you my daughter in marriage. He says, no, you don't have to do that, But the older Brahmana insists. So then at one point the young Brahman, he goes to claim his bride, and the older Brahmana's son, he's not very happy about this. His wife says, if you do this, I'll commit suicide. So he's real calamity for him, because he wants to he wants to give his daughter in marriage to this young Brahmin, because he sees, okay, the young Brahmin, he may not have money, but he has good qualities. He served me so nicely without any expectation of return. And so he could see that the young Brahmin actually had good qualities, therefore he was a suitable husband for his daughter. Anyhow, so he wound up being challenged by the son and the villagers that, you go to Vrindavan, you bring, because he said, he promised in front of the deity, he said, well, bring the deity here. And if the deity comes, then we'll accept this. So he went and saw the deity Gopal, and he was having a conversation with Gopal. And one really nice verse he said, Pratima nahi tumi sakshad brajendra nandana. My dear Lord, you're not a statue. You're directly the son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna. So based on this, he convinced that Gopal that he should walk from one side of India to the other. And then also we see the two other categories that are given there are offences due to lack of endeavour and offences due to lack of faith. Now, lack of endeavour, you could see things like, if one has the financial means to offer nice food preparations to the deity, but because they just couldn't be bothered or it's too much endeavour to do it, they'll just offer some dried fruit and a glass of water or something like that. I mean, there's many different ways of explaining that. Then offences due to the lack of faith, we could look at things like understanding that similar to the point of respect, but understanding that the deity is directly Krishna, like that story from Sakshi Gopal, and different things like that. To actually accept that the deity is Krishna, but also that the process of bhakti works. So if we don't accept these things, then we also can get in a situation where we might be committing various types of seva aparadha. Now, I just want to, I'll stop the screen share for a little while because I want to, just before I go on to the next section, there's some other slides that not slides, sorry, but there's just some other information that I'd like to cover here. And I went through all the different scriptures, or the ones that we have available to us to look at the different list of offences, and try to draw up a comparison between them to see like what things were in what scripture, the list, see how similar they were. And I came up with some interesting information. Again, I'm not going to cover it all because there's just too many things to cover, because I have three books and 64 in each book. It's like a huge amount of information to cover. But just the first list of 32, which comes from the Skanda Purana, the Avanti Khand, and there's some quite interesting information there. And one of the things that number 7 in the list from the Madhya Lila, it says one should not sit down before the deity with his legs crossed, nor should one touch his legs with his hands. I mean, I couldn't really understand this in great detail. The only way I can look at it is like like stretching your legs out in front of the deity, crossing your legs over, things like that. Because generally we do sit down in front of the deity with our legs crossed, but also the legs should be covered over, not that you're showing your feet or anything like that. But also you'll see in the other text it mentions about holding the ankles, elbows, or knees with one's hands. Then number 9, one should not eat before the deity. This is actually directly in front of the deity, because you see quite often that, say for instance in a temple like Vrindavan, they might, or Mayapur, they'll distribute Mahaprasadam directly from the altar during different festivals. And so devotees, they'll go off to the side to take the remnants of the deity. So it's okay to take prasad remnants in the temple, not just directly in front of the deity. Off to the side is fine. Then number 14, I came across an interesting one the other day. It was a little while ago actually, I was on the altar in the temple, and I was just sort of doing my normal kind of thing, and then I noticed the devotee who was worshipping one of the sets of deities. He had his mobile phone on the tray. Well, that's pretty interesting, because as you know, we often take our mobile phones into unclean places. And then it was really interesting. Just as I was thinking that, the phone rang, and then he picked the phone up and answered it. And so this is kind of like crossing over a few boundaries there. Obviously, one of them is one should not deal with others before the deity, but also one shouldn't talk to others in front of the deity. So it's good to avoid having conversation, especially when you're on the altar doing deity worship. So good to avoid those things. Then another one which was I found interesting was not to cover ourselves with a blanket. Now, in one place it says should not cover yourself with a blanket. In the other one it says one should not wear a fur blanket before the deity. Another place it says to wear a woolen blanket before the deity. Now, again, not really clear exactly what the point of this one is, because we often wear woolen chaddars in the temple. Woolen chaddars are quite warm. I was wondering, and I may have to research this one a little bit more to try and find out, is this possibly referring to the blanket that someone might use while they're sleeping? I don't know, but it's interesting. Now, another one, item number 23, one should not neglect to offer seasonal fruits as soon as they're available. And another place Prabhupada says fresh fruits and grains according to season. So it's always nice that, especially if you're living in a rural community where you're growing various produce, or you might have a vegetable garden or fruit trees or something growing in your yard, that, the first fruits that come from the tree, the first produce that comes out of the garden, then you will offer that to Krishna. This is considered to be, the proper way and this is also recognizing or accepting this understanding that actually everything comes from Krishna. So, very, very important point. And another one is one should offer fresh, untouched fruit to the deity. Now, this has several meanings there. One meaning is we can look at its meaning that the fruits should not be enjoyed by anyone else. But also, I look at it in another perspective, is that whenever like sometimes you'll see people when they bring gifts for the deities, they bring donations, whatever. They might bring some food or some fruit or something like that, and they might bring half a piece of fruit, the other half they've kept at home. It's good in those circumstances if we can educate them that actually they should bring the full fruit for Krishna, not just part fruits, just bring the full fruit for the Lord. Yeah. Now, another one here, which is really interesting, one should not offer obeisances to others before the deity. Then I saw that Prabhupada in different places explains in different ways. And he says one should not offer obeisances silently to the spiritual master, or in other words, one should recite aloud prayers to the spiritual master while offering obeisances. And so that was just one way of looking at it. Then there's quite a few interesting points here. I don't really have time to go over too many more, but I just thought I'd pull up a few which I thought were quite interesting points on that. Now I just want to go back to the slides because there's a few more interesting slides there. Let me just get back to our Zoom screen and see if I can find the slides. There we go. Back to the slideshow. Okay, so we've covered that. Then now this is really interesting, this next section, because as I was discussing before, there's two main elements of aparadha. One is seva aparadha, one is nama aparadha. Now these references here are coming from different Puranas, from the Skanda Purana, from the Brahmanda Purana, the Adi Varaha Purana, different things like that. So one way of overcoming, for someone who's doing regular deity worship, then it's important that you study the Shastra. And in the Puranas it mentions, this is from the Skanda Purana, that if you read at least one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every day, then you'll overcome the effect of seva aparadha. Also mentions by chanting the Vishnu Sahasranam. Also mentions reciting prayers, sowing Tulsi, reciting prayers glorifying Tulsi, or sowing a Tulsi seed are also very, very helpful. Then worshipping the Shalagram Shila is also a very, very effective way of overcoming seva aparadha. Of course, when you worship Shalagram Shila, you need to be very strict in your practice of bhakti. Then worshipping Lord Vishnu, and another one that's given in the Adivaraha Purana is the fasting for one day at the holy place known as Sokarava, which I don't know where that is, and then bathing in the Ganges. So obviously somewhere on the bank of the Ganges. So these are, you can see that actually when one does commit seva aparadha, obviously, you know, the mentality has to be correct, because we know from the offences against the holy name, the seventh offence is to commit simple activities on the strength of the holy name. So if one thinks that, well, because I'm chanting Hare Krishna, it doesn't matter if I do these things, then as pointed out by the acharyas, this is the most difficult offence to overcome. So we need to be mindful that we have to have the appropriate attitude, that yes, there's a nice prayer we chant at the end of Deity worship, you know, thousands of offences are performed by me day and night, but, you know, considering me your servant, kindly forgive those offences. You know, so this as we were saying before about this mood of humility, not thinking that I'm something special, not thinking that, you know, due to my ability or due to my, you know, whatever, that Krishna is going to accept my service, but actually rather understanding that I'm insignificant, and it's only by Krishna's mercy that he accepts whatever I'm offering. And then Prabhupada writes, he said, this is the test of standard service. If you see the deities in a pleasing mood, that will certify our service unto the Lord. So everywhere we shall see the deities in a pleasing mood. As soon as we see the deities in a different mood, we must immediately understand our discrepancies. This is a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote. I'll just finish with that thing now. But then also, you know, if one inadvertently offends the deities, we should sincerely pray to them for forgiveness and resolve to commit avoiding offences in the future. The following verse illustrates the proper mood. That's the verse I was just mentioning before. I commit thousands of offences day and night. O Madhusudan, but please think of me as your servant and kindly forgive them. Now, you know, there's different types of prayaschitta that are recommended in the Shastra, but the essential point of you know, this kind of overcoming aparadha is to remember that we're a servant of the Lord, and of course to take shelter of chanting the holy name. Now, I just want to do a quick comparison here between seva aparadha and Vaishnava aparadha, because often we find that, you know, devotees, when they're doing deity worship, are very concerned about seva aparadha, and you know, I've even come across situations where devotees will say to me that, well, no, I don't want to do deity worship because, you know, I'm committing too many offences. I don't know how to serve the deities properly. I'm worried about offence and all this sort of stuff. But when we look at, you know, sometimes at their behaviour, they're not sufficiently concerned about Vaishnava aparadha. Now, we know that Mahaprabhu, he referred to Vaishnava aparadha as the hati mata, the mad elephant offence. And the analogy of the mad elephant is quite appropriate, because we can see that, you know, if an elephant goes into a garden like a mad elephant, it will just destroy everything. Even I remember a few years ago seeing a video of an elephant that got upset with his, you know, mahant, you know, the person who sits on the back and directs the elephant. He got really upset with this man, and he just, like, he killed him, you know, very, very savagely, really. And you know, it's like when an elephant's mad, there's no defense against such a thing. So it's quite appropriate that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu referred to the Vaishnava aparadha as the mad elephant offense. Now, as I was just pointing out before, that, you know, if we're doing deity worship, and, you know, undoubtedly we're going to commit offences, because we're conditioned living entities. You know, we've come to this material world because we're neglectful of Krishna. We're neglectful of our relationship with Krishna. So we just accept that we're going to commit offences. It's not that we should, that point I was reading before is that, we shouldn't be spending too much time worrying about seva aparadha. It's not that we should sort of make that our focus, but just accept that, yes, because of my shortcomings, because of my material conditioning, because of all these different things, that I am going to commit offences. But we just take shelter of Krishna sincerely and seriously with all humility, and understand that Krishna will forgive us. There's a really beautiful lecture, I mentioned this one a lot, that Srila Prabhupada gave when he was installing the small deities in Los Angeles, Rukmini Dwarkanath. I think I sent a link out to it a little while ago. And towards the end of that lecture, when we're talking about the bulk offering, I think I sent that out. Towards the end of the lecture, Srila Prabhupada, he was describing the mood of worship that is appropriate for Pujari. And basically he was saying that, I am rotten, I am fallen, I have no good qualities, but and I have nothing to offer you, but out of your kindness, my Lord, you please accept that which I have brought you. And we see that, throughout our Gaudiya Vaishnava history, that so many devotees engaged in deity worship have demonstrated the same wonderful qualities. So this is giving us a lesson of how to, overcome the seva aparadha, and how to actually situate ourselves in the process of bhakti. And there's a really interesting section. I won't read the whole thing because it's quite lengthy, but we see that Gaur Govinda Maharaj again, in one of his, I think it was an essay called Sri Guru Vandana, and he was talking about Vaishnava aparadha, and he makes the same point there. If someone commits Vaishnava aparadha, the bhakti lata is uprooted, finished. But the same point's not made about seva aparadha. So we can see that it's really important that because if we're not humble, we're going to see the shortcomings of everyone else. If we actually become humble, we'll see the shortcomings of ourselves. There's I used to have one of those desktop calendars, the little, I don't know what they call them, Rolodex or something, like the flip calendar, where you have one page for each day, and there's a little sort of poem or sort of saying or something down the bottom. And there was one there which I really, there's many of them I appreciated. This one stuck in my mind. And it was some famous poet who wrote this, and he said, if a person spent their time looking for their own faults, they'd never have time to look for the faults of others. Because as we all understand, in this world, we're all an ocean of faults. This world is an ocean of faults. So why be so concerned about other people's shortcomings? It's better if we spend our time focusing on our own shortcomings and try to deal with those, try to overcome those. And if we cultivate humility, then rather than see the fault of others, we'll actually see the fault in ourselves. And this is going to be a very, very effective way of overcoming the offenses in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so that's our time on that. Just if there's, as I mentioned before, please keep in mind or keep in your prayers Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Let me just see if we've got on our. Just trying to see. Oh, here's an interesting one. Is it an offense to chant Gayatri when the deities rest? I couldn't think of any reason why it would be. Srila Prabhupada, this is kind of an interesting one, because several times he was, one time when he gave someone Gayatri Diksha, and then the devotee was trying to find out some kind of instruction from Srila Prabhupada. He wanted to get some special instruction from Prabhupada about when to chant Gayatri. And, he was asking about, should it be near the sun, should it be this, should it be that? And Prabhupada said, morning, noon, night. So, okay, and he went away. And then a little while later, he came back and asked the same thing about, should it be here? I can't remember the exact detail of it, but he was trying to get Prabhupada to agree with this perspective of chanting on the sanyas. And again, Srila Prabhupada said morning, noon, night. And actually, he said that 3 times. So the point, I think the main point here is to understand that we chant the Gayatri, in the morning, and that could be, like Prabhupada, he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj when he was bathing in the morning that like waking up, bathing, putting on tilak, he said chant your Gayatri after that point there. So that's usually around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's not like strictly in connection to the Sandhya. Usually Prabhupada would chant his. I remember asking Shruti Kirti about this years ago. And Prabhupada would have his bath in the afternoon before he had lunch, and then he would chant Gayatri, and then he would eat his lunch. And usually, I can't remember the time, but I think it was close to 1:30 or 2 o'clock he would eat lunch. So you can see that he wasn't so strict on the chanting on the Sandhyas. Then he would generally chant in the evening. But the main thing is to chant the Gayatri with attention. And sometimes you may be engaged in something that you can't stop. You can't sort of become distracted from it to chant Gayatri. It might be you're at a preaching program, you might be delivering a class in front of an audience or something like that, and it's time for the Gayatri. I mean, it's not going to look very good if you're presenting to a few hundred people, a few thousand people, and it's 12 o'clock. Oh, sorry, I've got to stop and chant Gayatri. And they're going to think it's a little bit strange. So, you need to be practical with these things and just chant the most practical time for whatever's the most practical time for chanting Gayatri. But keeping it as close as you can to the guidance. You need to be practical with these morning, noon, and night. Yeah. Let me see what else. Okay. I often see that when devotees come to take, this is from Vijay Baladev Prabhu. I often see that when devotees come to take darshan on the deities, they also offer basis to Tulsi Devi and circumambulate her. Should that be discouraged, as normally would only do it while the curtains are closed? So it seems like Prabhu's got a few questions. So there is a letter that Prabhupada wrote to Kirtanananda, and in that letter, Srila Prabhupada mentions that we only circumambulate Tulsi Devi when the curtains are closed. So you can water Tulsi, you can pay obeisance to her in front of the deities, but not circumambulate. This is one of the restrictions that are given there. And Prabhupada also mentioned that, as I said in a letter, not to circumambulate Tulsi Devi in front of the deities. But we see sometimes in kirtan that devotees will be dancing around in a circular kind of motion. That's perfectly okay, because that dancing is part of the glorification of the Lord. Then Vijay Baladev has another question. I also heard an opinion that in front of the deities doesn't mean that if we close the curtain, the Lord is not there anymore, and we don't have to worry about those offences to be avoided in front of the deities. For example, some temples close the curtains and let people in to take prasadam. That's perfectly fine to do that, and you'll see in many temples in the early days, that was the only place they had to take prasadam, was in the temple room. So, as long as we're not eating directly in front of the deities, that's fine. Okay, what else do we have over here? Let me just take this over here. This is from Prema Priya Devi Dasi. Then, thank you very much for the class. In some temples, devotees are not trained before doing altar services. I have had experience where devotees, while dressing, have their own conversations and use mobiles without being offensive. How can we address this issue? Well, I mean, I saw this devotee a little while ago answering his phone, and honestly, it was the first time I'd ever seen it. And I've been on a lot of altars around the world. So it's interesting that you're also having this same experience. I think the real solution or answer to this problem is training. That if devotees are trained properly, then they will understand how to serve the deity properly. Another way, because if you start pointing things out to devotees, especially if it's not our service, then devotees might get offended. So we have to be very careful there. Not to offend devotees, not to upset devotees, not to I mean, sometimes devotees will just if you try to tell them to do things, they'll just give up, they'll go away, and we need to understand that this analogy that Lord Chaitanya gives of the Bhakti Lata Bij, how in the beginning stage of devotion, the creeper, it's just like I don't know if anyone on the webinar today is a gardener, but I have a vegetable garden outside, and what I find is when the seedlings are very small, they're very delicate, and if an insect comes along and nips on the stalk of the thing, it's dead straight away. But when they grow, when they get bigger, then they can deal with a fair bit of a fair amount of insects eating them and things like that. So we need to, and this is one thing that I was listening to some lectures recently from Kripa Moiprabhu from the Manor, and he was discussing Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and talking about how they would modify their presentation considering the audience. And we also see that Srila Prabhupada said that. So the idea is like when you're looking at devotees who are doing things like this, then you really have to look at who it is you're dealing with, and if you present something to them in a very forthright, straightforward manner, how will they deal with that? And if you think they won't deal with it, then you need to look at different ways of presenting this information so that you achieve your there's different end results you're trying to achieve here. One end result you're trying to achieve is that these things aren't happening in the deity department or in the service, and the other thing you're trying to achieve here is that the devotees are inspired in Krishna consciousness. So it's not just about, okay, we've got the rules and regulations and we have to follow the rules and regulations, and it doesn't matter with anything else. No, we have to look at both sides of it. Is how to follow the rules and regulations, but how to keep devotees inspired in Krishna consciousness, and that's the challenge. And so sometimes you really need to think carefully about this. One thing you can do is I've seen in some temples is they have like those signs they have with the red circle with a cross through it, and they might have a cigarette or something like that in the picture, or a glass of alcohol. So you get one of those signs made up, and it's got a mobile phone in it. And you put that outside the altar, outside the altar, so before pujaris go on the altar, they can see no mobile phones. So, but then also, I think the idea of conversations, etc. A lot of that's going to come from, especially when you're dealing with younger devotees, if they see the older devotees chatting on the altar, they're also going to be chatting on the altar. If they see the older devotees, the senior devotees setting good examples, then in due course they'll follow the good example of the older devotees. So it's Apriyachari Prabhuji Vera Sikaya. First your behavior becomes ideal, then you can preach. So it requires sensitivity. But it's achievable. It's definitely achievable. Then Radha Shalini from Sydney, and I want to thank Radha Shalini for helping me researching different topics, and also there's a few other devotees helping with researching different topics. I'm really grateful for your assistance there. So Radha Shalini says, I know you said that people should not obsess about making offences, but we constantly hear about offences and it freaks devotees out. How can you change your mindset not to be so obsessed about offences without minimising the impact of offences? Well, I hope this conversation hasn't led you to think that I'm obsessed about offences, because I'm certainly not. But I do, I'm aware of the offences, and in my personal conduct in deity worship, I try to be mindful of the way I practice deity worship, so that I'm not committing any aparadhas, but also trying to set an example for others. And if you look, in Prabhupada's teachings, you'll see he only discusses the offences in 3 places, as I mentioned, in the Bhagavatam, in 1 purport, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in 1 purport, and also in 1 chapter in the Nectar Devotion. Now, even if you just look at the Nectar Devotion, right, there's 19 chapters there dealing with Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti or Sadhana Bhakti. There's only 1 chapter. There's approximately 5%. In all the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada said there's 18,000 verses in the Bhagavatam, right? So you take 2 verses out of 18,000. How many is that? It's not very many. If you compare that to the whole body of the Bhagavatam, that 1 purport with about 3 paragraphs dealing with the offences in deity worship, very small. So it's not like it's our obsession. It's not like it's our focus. But we just need to be mindful of these things. It's just like, you're driving down the road in your car, and it's not like you're obsessed with how much petrol's in the tank. You're mindful that it needs to have enough petrol in the tank so you get to the destination, but you're not obsessed by it. So I think it's, you have to be keep things in perspective. Yes, we do need, as servants of Krishna, we do need to know the appropriate etiquette. It's simply really bad etiquette. But better we take a proactive approach to it rather than a reactive approach or becoming absorbed with the offences. Better we are proactive and we try to work in a more positive way, as that purport I mentioned. I'll show that purport letter from Srila Prabhupada, where he was talking about work in a way that is pleasing to Krishna, serving in a way that's pleasing to Krishna. Not being so concerned about, we're just becoming obsessed with offences. Then also Radharani asked a second question there. Sometimes devotees come out of the altar to take or make calls. I think you need to be a little bit sensitive there, because, for instance, if a mother is coming off the altar to call her children, or her child's calling her, and there's some calamity at home or something like that, then I think Krishna is a person also, and he is aware of the relationship. He is aware of the need that is there. So I think I would just hope that they're not making the calls on the altar. That's the main thing for me. And they're not having conversations on the altar. If they do need to come out of the altar because of these different situations, then I think we just need to be a little bit giving, accommodating, a bit of humility, a bit of compassion there, to understand that because if they're just coming off the altar, ring up their friend and say hello, then that's not a very good situation. But if they're doing it because it's something that's important, something that's necessary, then I think there's something we just, I'm sure that Krishna would understand those things. So this is from Shama Priya Dasi. I know one Mataji who's not initiated but baked a cake at home and presented it inside on our temple during Janmashtami. Is this something that's okay? Different temples have different standards on major festivals. And even we see in Mayapur, for instance, when the deities go out on the elephant procession, then anyone who wants to cook something is able to offer it to the deities. So I think you'll find that just in different temples there's different standards. As a regular practice for the Nitya Seva, then no, it's not okay. But for festivals, because festivals are called Naimittika Seva, and especially when I remember talking to Janani Osaru about this years ago, and he was making the point that when the deity comes out of off the altar and goes out to visit the people, he's in this merciful mood, because this is part of his compassion, is to come out to see people. So in that situation, he's more merciful. So it's just different situation. Okay. Another question from Radha Shalini. How do you handle a situation where senior and junior devotees come out and knock on the door and ask for you to make place for them when the bhog hasn't even been offered? I would put up a sign on the door and saying, do not knock on the door before this time. Because otherwise you're just going to wind up getting yourself into confrontation all the time, especially, but, I've got this and it's very important, the time, there's always an excuse. But just a sign on the door, and just if they come knock on the door, just point to the sign rather than getting involved in any conflict. Better to avoid conflict in any way, shape, or form. Avoid conflict. There's this, like with this virus going around right now, and there's this big discussion about vaccination and would you get vaccinated or not. And I just tell the devotees, I'm really not interested in it. I don't have any time for it, because it's a controversial topic, and some devotees are going to really churn this topic and try to get as much out of it as they can. But really, it's not going to help us in our Krishna consciousness. The main thing is to somehow or other focus on having sweet relationships with devotees, and so that we can nurture our Krishna consciousness and also nurture their Krishna consciousness. This is really important. Now, Vijay Baladev Prabhu, if we teach the pujaris the do's and don'ts and we have the rules posted everywhere and they still don't follow, what should be done? Especially in our setup when we only have a handful of devotees serving. Keep trying, just keep trying. Be compassionate, be loving, keep trying. That's all you can do, because even like if you had a lot of devotees, I've had the experience where in some temples, if a devotee didn't follow the standards, they were banned from the altar. I don't think that's the right approach, because the whole idea is we're trying to reawaken the living entity's loving relationship with Krishna. And if you cut them off from the very thing that gives them the opportunity to reawaken their relationship with Krishna, I think that's a bit of a failure. So, it's really important to work on cultivating a relationship, because if you have a good relationship with people, then they will respect what you have to say. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy to cultivate good relationships. Sometimes it's quite challenging. But that's where I feel we need to focus, is on cultivating relationships. And just on that point, I just wanted to mention to you is that to actually everyone on the call, is that probably in a few weeks, I'm not exactly sure, we're just working on it now, we finished the first module of our online deity worship course. And this is the bowl offering module. It's 3 lessons, and we're going to put that up soon. So I will post that on Facebook so that everyone knows where to find it. And this is going through a lot of the different details of how to offer bhoga to the deities. There's a video of how to offer bhoga. There's a whole lot of information there. So getting into a lot of information, a lot of details and stuff like that. Different exercises. Readings with questions and answers, stuff from Bhagavad Gita and stuff. And one of the goals I have is, once we get this course or this unit of temple worship complete, is I'm going to start working with the temples to try to get it to the point where this becomes mandatory for anyone who's a temple pujari or going to do regular deity worship in an ISKCON temple to complete this training first, so that they have a very good, so the devotees who are doing the worship have a very good understanding of what is expected in temple worship. It won't be free, but it will be quite reasonably priced. So just keep that in mind, and I'll let you know when it's ready. Okay, can we eat poppy seeds? This is from Rahul Binyani. Can we eat poppy seeds? I'm not sure. I couldn't clearly say. I'm not sure, but I have seen them. Actually, in West Bengal, poshta. Poshta means poppy seeds. So yeah, there's a lot of preparations with poppy seeds in West Bengal. So yes, and they grind them up and they use them to make a paste with put in their churn. So yeah, poppy seeds are fine. Can we offer the same sweets 2 days? Better you offer fresh sweets every day, fresh sweets every meal. Can we eat coriander and chatamasya? Coriander is not considered a green leafy vegetable. Coriander is more like a condiment. The chatamasya refers more strictly to sak, I mean, different types of spinach. In West Bengal, I think they have 11 different types of spinach. Motha sak and all these different types of sak they have there. So that the specific refers to sak. It doesn't mean cabbage. It doesn't mean lettuce. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means sak. What can you avoid in Chatamasha? So I don't remember the orders, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. But I think the last two are milk and yogurt, and then one of them is urd dal, and the other one is sak. Yeah. So this is the 4 months, and Prabhupada said it's obligatory for all varnas and ashrams to follow that. So it's not just some, but he wanted everyone to follow that. And then from Malini, she has a question. We are serving 2 Lada Gopal deities, out of which one was given by the neighbor as they were not worshipping. Is it okay to serve 2 in the same altar? Very nice. That's perfectly okay. Okay, so I'd like to thank you all very much for taking the time to be present for this webinar today.